The valet took my keys without looking at my face, which told me everything I needed to know about how the night was going to go. I'd driven up to the club early on purpose, before the lot filled, before the photographers my sister hired set up their soft boxes on the terrace. I wanted a few quiet minutes to myself in the parking lot of the Glenmore Club before I had to put on the face. The lake was flat and silver behind the clubhouse, the kind of June evening in Lake Forest, where the light goes golden slow and makes even the parking attendants look like they're standing in a painting. I'd bought a new dress for this. Charcoal, simple, nothing that would compete with the bride. I'd hemmed it myself on a Tuesday night because the tailor wanted $90, and I'd decided I'd rather keep the $90. Old habits. I grew up counting things. I signed the guest book in the foyer, and a cousin I hadn't seen in 3 years air-kissed the space next to my cheek. "You came," she said, like I'd RSVP'd to a funeral I wasn't expected at. "Of course you did." "Of course I did," I said. "She's my sister." The cousin smiled the way people smile when they've already decided you're the lesser story in the room. "Well," she said, "it's nice that you could get the time off." I let it go. I'd gotten very good, over the years, at letting things go. People think that's the same as not noticing. It isn't. I noticed all of it. I just stopped giving my reactions away for free a long time ago. The ceremony was held on the south lawn under a white tent the size of a small church. There were 300 chairs in tidy rows, each tied with eucalyptus and ribbon, and the first 8 rows had little laminated cards taped to the seat backs. Family, family, bridal party, family. I walked the aisle slowly, reading them, the way you read a list looking for your own name, and already knowing you won't find it. I found my parents in the second row, my mother in dove grey, my father with a fresh haircut, both of them turned toward the front, both of them glowing. Neither one looked back to find me. An usher I'd never met touched my elbow and steered me gently toward a folding chair near the very last row, half behind the tent pole, where the speakers were stacked and the caterers cut through to the kitchen. "This one okay?" he asked, already walking away. It was not okay. It hadn't been okay for 31 years. But I sat down and folded my hands over my little clutch and watched my baby sister get married from the cheap seats. The way I'd watched her get everything from the cheap seats my whole life. She was beautiful. I'll give her that without any bitterness, because it's true. She came down the aisle on my father's arm in a gown that cost more than my first car, and when she reached the front, the man waiting for her took her hand like he was accepting delivery of something he'd ordered. My new brother-in-law, the developer, the one whose name was on signs all over the city now, on the construction fencing of a glass tower going up downtown that everyone said was going to change the skyline. He had a jaw you could open envelopes with, and the kind of confidence that fills a room before the man does. My mother had been talking about him for a year. Such a catch, such a future. She landed on her feet, that one. As if my sister were a cat and marriage were a height she'd survived. The vows were nice. The applause was loud. I clapped because clapping is what you do, and because the people on either side of me would have noticed if I didn't. And I have never in my life given the satisfaction of being the one who didn't clap. The reception was inside, in the grand ballroom with the coffered ceiling and the chandeliers the club is famous for, the ones in every wedding photo taken in this zip code for 50 years. I went looking for my place card the way you'd look for a misplaced wallet, with a low dread in my stomach. The tables had little brass numbers and calligraphy cards arranged in a long line on a side table by the entrance. Table 1, parents, grandparents. Table 2, bridal party. I trailed my finger down the alphabet of my own family until I found my card at the very bottom of the stack, and then I had to walk almost the entire length of the ballroom to find where it sent me. Table 19. Back corner, beside the swinging kitchen doors, where the busboys came through with bins of dirty glasses and the heat from the kitchen rolled out every time the door opened. I was seated with my father's accountant, 2 of the groom's business associates who didn't know me, and an empty chair. The placard at my seat, the little folded tent card with the table number and the guest's name, had been printed wrong or maybe printed right. It said +1. Not my name, not even a guess at my name. Just a slot, the way you'd hold space for a stranger. One of the groom's associates glanced at it, then at me and said with a smile that thought it was charming, "You with the catering company or?" "No," I said, "I'm the sister." He blinked. "Oh, huh. I figured all the family was up front." "You'd think," I said, and I smiled at him, and I picked up the card and turned it face down on the tablecloth so I wouldn't have to look at it. Here is the thing nobody tells you about being the overlooked one in a family that loves a golden child. It is not loud. It does not come at you with fists. It comes at you in seating charts and cropped photographs, and the half second your mother's eyes pass over you, on her way to look at someone she's prouder of. It is 1,000 tiny erasures, and each one is small enough to be deniable, small enough that if you ever said anything out loud you'd be the dramatic one, the bitter one, the one who can't just be happy for her sister. So you don't say anything. You sit by the kitchen door and you fold your hands, and you let the steam from the dish pit fog up the back of your neck, and you tell yourself it doesn't matter, and most of the time you almost believe it. I want to be honest about something because this is my story and I'd rather you hear it straight. I was not at that wedding by accident, and I was not as poor as everyone in that room believed. But for a long time that night, sitting by the kitchen door with a turn-down card, I felt every old year of it. I felt 8 years old at my own birthday party, which had been combined with my sister's recital because the recital was the same week, and watching everyone bring flowers for her. I felt 16, in a hand-me-down homecoming dress that smelled faintly of someone else's closet, while my sister got a custom one. I felt every Thanksgiving I'd sat at the kids' table well into my 20s because the adults' table only had so many chairs, and somebody had to give theirs up, and somehow it was always me who volunteered, because volunteering was easier than being asked. I was so deep in that fog that I almost missed the young man refilling water at my table. He was maybe 22, in the club's black vest, careful and quick, the way people are careful and quick when the job matters. He set my glass down, and then he paused. He looked at me a beat too long. Then he leaned in just slightly and said, very low so only I could hear it, "Ma'am, I'm sorry, I don't mean to bother you. But are you the one who runs the Brennan Scholarship?" I looked up at him. I help run a foundation, yes. His throat moved. My little brother got the housing grant last fall, after our mom passed. We were about to lose the apartment. He stopped like he hadn't planned to say all of that and now couldn't stop it. I wanted to say thank you. He's still in school because of it. I recognized your name from the letter. I didn't trust my voice for a second. Of all the people in that ballroom of 300, the only one who knew exactly who I was, the only one who'd said my actual name out loud all evening, was the kid refilling the water. "What's his name?" I asked. "Eli," he said. "He's a sophomore now. Wants to do nursing. Tell Eli to keep going," I said. "And thank you. You don't know what it means to hear that tonight." He nodded and moved on before anyone noticed. The way people in vests learn to move. And I sat there with my chest tight in a completely different way than it had been a minute before. Funny how it works. You can absorb 1,000 small cruelties and stay perfectly composed, and then one stranger's kindness almost takes you apart. Dinner came and went. I made small talk with the accountant. The toast started after the salad plates were cleared, and that's when my brother-in-law took the microphone. He was good at it. I'll grant him that too. He had the room from the first sentence, easy and warm, telling the story of how he met my sister, the meet-cute, the first date, the proposal at the top of his half-built tower with the whole city spread out below them. People laughed in the right places. My mother had her hands pressed together under her chin like she was watching a sunrise. My father kept turning to the table behind him with a look that said, "Can you believe this guy? Can you believe we got this guy?" And then he got to the part about family. "Every family's got its all-stars," he said, swirling his champagne. "And every family's got its He let the pause hang, and the room leaned in, already smiling at a punchline they hadn't heard. "It's role players. The ones who keep things humble. Right? And honestly, that's a blessing. Keeps you grounded." He found me at the back of the room. I watched him find me. So I just want to raise a glass to my beautiful bride, the star of this family, and to her sister back there. 300 heads turned, a slow wave of them, until I was sitting at the bottom of 150 gazes, who proves that every family needs a little poor relation to make the rest of us look good. The laughter that came was the worst kind, not cruel exactly, worse than cruel, easy, comfortable. The laughter of people who didn't think twice, who'd already filed me under whatever category lets you laugh at a person and not feel it. My father chuckled and clapped the table. My mother smiled the tight, pleasant smile she uses to tell the world that whatever just happened was charming and fine. My sister, in her beautiful dress, put her hand over her mouth and laughed into it, looking up at her new husband like he'd just done something brave. I'm going to tell you the truth about that moment, because the version where I sat there serene and untouchable would be a lie, and you've had enough lies told to you by people who pretend they never bleed. My eyes stung. My hand, around the stem of my water glass, started to shake. There was a half-second where I thought I might actually stand up and walk out of that ballroom and drive home and never speak to any of them again. And the only reason I didn't is that I knew if I left, the story they'd tell about tonight would be that I couldn't take a joke. They'd own it. I would have handed them the ending, so I breathed. I set my glass down very carefully so no one would see the shake. I put my napkin in my lap and smoothed it flat twice. And I let the worst of it pass through me like a wave. You let knock you down because fighting it is how you drown. And then my phone buzzed against my thigh. I slid it just far enough out of my clutch to read the screen. It was from my partner, 3 words and a green dot. It's recorded. We control it now. He hasn't been served. I read it twice. The shaking in my hand stopped. Something settled in me, low and cool and certain, the way a key settles into a lock. Let me back up, because you deserve to understand what was about to walk through those doors. When I was 23 broke, 2 years out of the state school, I'd put myself through on loans and a part-time job at a property management office. I noticed something nobody else in that office seemed to care about: the little numbers, the construction loans, the way developers borrowed enormous sums against buildings that didn't exist yet, on the promise of buyers who hadn't signed yet, with cushions of cash that were thinner than they looked. I noticed that the whole glittering business ran on debt, and that the people who actually held the power weren't the men with their names on the buildings. It was the people who held the paper, the lenders, the quiet ones. So I learned the paper. I spent 10 years learning it. I started by underwriting other people's deals for a salary, and then I started putting in a little of my own money alongside, and then a little more, and then I found a partner, a sharp, patient woman named Helen Donovan, who'd spent 20 years in real estate credit and was tired of making other people rich. We started a fund, a small one at first. We made loans to developers on terms that protected us if they got greedy, because they always got greedy. And we got very good at one specific thing, knowing exactly which overconfident men were about to fall, and being holding their debt when they did. I never told my family, not because I was ashamed, because the first time I tried, at a Sunday dinner, to explain that I'd started a fund and we'd just closed our first 8-figure deal, my mother had said, "That's nice, honey," and turned to ask my sister about her new apartment, and I understood, finally and completely, that there was no number large enough to make them see me. They had decided who I was when I was small. The poor one, the plain one, the role player. So I stopped offering them the chance to be impressed. I let them keep believing whatever made them comfortable, and I quietly built something they couldn't have imagined. And then, 8 months ago, a developer came to a competitor of ours, looking for mezzanine financing on a luxury condo tower in downtown Chicago. He was overextended, leveraged to the eyeballs, burning through his construction loan faster than units were pre-selling. The competitor passed. The deal landed on Helen's desk, and Helen brought it to me. And when I opened the file and saw the name of the developer, I sat in my office for a long time, very still. My sister's fiancé. I didn't make the loan out of spite, I want that to be clear. We made the loan because it was a good loan for us. We structured it the way we structure all of them, with covenants and triggers, and a mountain of fine print that he and his lawyers waved through, because men like him don't read the fine print. They think the fine print is for people who are afraid. We held the mezzanine debt, and a piece of the senior debt too, through a holding company 3 names removed from mine. And then we waited, the way we always wait, and we watched him do exactly what we knew he'd do, which was miss his pre-sale targets, blow through his reserves, and trip his covenants one by one like a man walking down a hallway setting off every alarm. The text on my phone meant the last domino had fallen. The default was official. The transfer of control was recorded with the county that afternoon, while my sister was getting her hair done. The tower with his name on the fence, the tower he proposed on top of, the engine of the entire image he'd just spent 3 minutes performing for 300 people. It didn't belong to him anymore. It belonged to a holding company whose ultimate owner was sitting at table 19, by the kitchen door, with a turned-down place card and a shaking hand that had just gone still. I put the phone away. I picked up my water glass, and this time it didn't shake at all. The toasts wound down. The band started up. People drifted toward the dance floor and the dessert table and the bar, and my brother-in-law worked the room like a man running for office, clapping shoulders, telling the same story about the tower 3 different times to 3 different circles. Tallest residential in the West Loop, sold out by Q3. Watch, I built this from nothing, you know that. Nothing, I heard him say to a cluster of men near the bar, his voice carrying the way a man's voice carries when he's never once been told to lower it. My firm clears more in a quarter than this whole side of the family's worth combined. No offense to anybody. He laughed. They laughed. I sat and I watched, and I felt the last of the old hurt cool into something clean and flat as glass. Because I knew what he didn't. I knew that Helen was already in the building. She came in through the main doors during a lull in the music, and you could feel the room register her before anyone knew who she was. She had that quality some people have, where they don't hurry and don't apologize, and the crowd just opens. Navy suit. Silver hair pinned back. A leather folio under one arm. She scanned the ballroom once, calm, and then she walked. Not toward the bride, not toward my parents, not toward the man at the center of his own party who was already stepping forward with his hand out, and his salesman's grin lighting up because here surely was someone important, someone worth knowing. She walked past his hand like it wasn't there, straight to the back corner, straight to me. The room turned the way rooms do. I saw my mother's smile falter. I saw my sister's champagne pause halfway to her lips. Helen stopped at my chair, and she gave me a small nod, the nod of a colleague, of an equal, and she said, in a voice pitched to carry just far enough, "Good evening, Miss Brennan, everything's recorded, we're clear." Brennan, my mother's maiden name. The name I'd quietly built everything under, because I'd wanted something that was mine, and not theirs, not the sister, not the poor relation. A name with weight, and she'd just set that weight down in the middle of my sister's wedding for the whole family to hear. My brother-in-law's hand was still hanging in the air where Helen had passed it. "I'm sorry," he said, and the grin was working too hard now. "Do you two? I don't think I'm the groom, this is my—" "I know who you are, Mr. Maddox," Helen said, turning to him with the mild, terrible politeness of a person delivering news she's delivered 100 times. "I'm the managing partner of the fund that holds your construction debt." She let that land, held. "As of this afternoon, we've completed the transfer. The Halcyon project is under our control, effective immediately." I will remember the silence that followed for the rest of my life. It wasn't the absence of sound. The band was still tuning, glasses were still clinking somewhere. It was the silence of 300 people all deciding, at the same instant, that they needed to hear what came next. My brother-in-law laughed. It came out wrong, too high. Okay, there's clearly been a mix-up. The Halcyon's fine. We had a covenant thing, our council's handling it. It's a paperwork issue." "It's not a paperwork issue," Helen said. "You defaulted in March. You missed the cure period in May. The transfer was recorded with Cook County at 2 o'clock this afternoon." She said it gently. That was the worst part for him, I think. She said it the way you'd correct a child about the day of the week. "You don't own the tower anymore." A murmur went through the crowd like wind through a field. Default the tower. Did she say default? The men he'd been bragging to at the bar took one small step back, all of them in unison the way a tide pulls off a beach. I watched it happen. I watched the circle around him widen by a single step, and I understood that I was watching the exact moment his life changed, and that he didn't understand it yet, but everyone else had already begun to. My sister set her glass down on the nearest table. Her hand was shaking now. "Somebody explain what's happening," she said, to no one, to the room. I stood up. I didn't rush it. I'd spent 31 years being told where to sit. I was going to take my time standing. I smoothed my charcoal dress, the one I'd hemmed myself, and I walked out from behind the kitchen door, past the busboys with their bins, into the light. People moved out of my way without meaning to. My mother stared at me like she'd never seen me before, and in a way she hadn't. "Hi," I said to my brother-in-law when I reached him. My voice was very even. "I'm the poor relation." He looked at me. He looked at Helen. He looked back at me, and I watched it arrive. All of it at once, the way the whole thing fit together. "You," he said, "the fund is I held your debt," I said, "for 8 months. I sat across from your lawyers at the closing, behind a holding company, while they congratulated themselves on the terms. I watched you trip every covenant in the book, because you never once thought the person on the other side of the paper might matter." I let myself look at him a long moment. "You spent 3 minutes tonight telling everyone here that I'm the role player, the humble one, the poor one who makes the rest of you look good." I leaned in just slightly, just enough for the front row to hear, the way you do when you want a line to be remembered. "Come Monday, you'll be working for the poor relation, if we keep you on at all." The sound that went through the ballroom wasn't a gasp. It was sharper than a gasp. It was the sound of a story flipping over in real time, of 150 people who'd laughed at me 20 minutes ago all rearranging at once. Everything they thought they knew about who in this family had the power. My father had sunk into a chair. I saw it out of the corner of my eye. The man who'd spent a year telling his golf buddies about his brilliant developer son-in-law, who'd raised a glass tonight to the same joke that erased me, sat down hard and didn't get back up. My brother-in-law tried to laugh again. There was nothing in it. "She's joking," he said to the room, his voice climbing. "Obviously she's. This is a misunderstanding. We'll have it cleared up by morning, nobody panic." But the men at the bar were already drifting toward the coat check, already pulling out their phones, already becoming people who'd known all along that the Halcyon was shaky, who'd had their doubts, who'd never really trusted him. When the money goes, the friends go with it, and they go fast, and they leave the lights on behind them. My sister grabbed my arm. Her grip was tight enough to hurt. "What did you do?" she whispered. Her eyes were wet and furious and frightened all at once, and for the first time in our entire lives, she was actually looking at me, seeing me. Too late, the way they always saw me too late. I stopped pretending to be invisible, I said. I took her hand off my arm, not unkindly, and I set it down at her side, and I turned and looked for my mother. She was standing very still by table one hand at her throat, her mouth slightly open, no script left to read from. For 31 years she'd had something to say about me, a category to put me in, a way to make me smaller so my sister could be bigger. She didn't have anything now. I held her eyes for a moment. I didn't say anything either. Some silences you give back exactly the way you received them. Then I picked up my clutch, and I found the young man in the black vest by the kitchen door, and I stopped in front of him. Tell Eli, I said, that there's a paid internship at my fund whenever he wants it. Summers, breaks, whatever fits around nursing school. Have him email the foundation. They'll know who he is. The kid's eyes went wide. Ma'am, you said thank you to me when no one else in this room would even say my name, I said. I don't forget things like that. Neither should you. I walked out through the main doors my brother-in-law had stood in front of, into the June night that smelled like cut grass and the lake. The valet who hadn't looked at my face on the way in pulled my car around, and this time he looked at me, because by now the whole staff had heard, the way staff always hears everything first. He held the door. I didn't drive away angry. I want you to know that. I'd thought for years that the day this finally turned would feel like winning. It didn't feel like winning. It felt like setting down something I'd been carrying so long. I'd forgotten my arms could be empty. The hurt was still there. The 8-year-old at the combined birthday, the 16-year-old in the borrowed dress, the woman at the kids' table at 30. They were all still in me, and they always would be. But they didn't have their hands around my throat anymore. That was the difference. You don't get to erase the years. You just get to decide they're done bleeding you. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat as I pulled onto the road along the lake. Not my mother. Not my sister, though I knew those calls were coming. The ones that would start with apologies that were really requests. It was a different number. The foundation had forwarded it. It was from a name I didn't recognize, a girl somewhere downstate, and it said only, I got the letter today. I'm the first one in my family to go to college. I don't know how to thank you. I just wanted you to know what it means. I sat at the stop sign longer than I needed to, reading it, the lake going dark and silver out the window. 300 people in a ballroom behind me had spent the evening deciding I was nothing, and a stranger I'd never met had just told me I was the reason her whole life was about to be different. I knew which of those two things was true. I'd known it for a long time. I just hadn't needed anyone else to know it until tonight. I put the car in drive. The headlines about the halcyon would start tomorrow. I'd read them over coffee like everyone else, and I wouldn't feel a thing about them either way. Monday I'd go back to my office and my own chair at the head of my own table. The one I'd built with my own hands when nobody was looking, and I'd hire a frightened kid who wanted to be a nurse, and I'd keep doing the quiet work that had never once needed an audience. They'd called me the poor relation right up until the night they learned whose paper they'd all been standing on. And the strange thing, the thing I never expected, was that when I finally drove away from them for good, I wasn't poor at all, and I wasn't angry, and I wasn't even sad. I was just at long last, free.